Welcome to the Hanshaw's Horizon podcast, where we explore learning science and all that you need to create a high performance learning environment. If you like this type of content, give me a like and subscribe, and also leave a comment. Tell me something I may have missed. Tell me something that you do that pertains to the topic. Because remember, this is a conversation. Nobody knows it all, but as a community, we know a whole lot more. My name is Dr. George Hanshaw, and today we are going to begin exploring what is the high performance classroom and how do we make it. This is part one. And within part one, we're going to define the characteristics of a high performing classroom. What are they? Then we're going to jump into what is learner centered and cognitive load, because we all know about extraneous cognitive load, but there's a couple other pieces that go along with it. After we go through cognitive load, then we're going to get into the structure of the course and how to structure a course for success. So not necessarily the electronic or physical structure of the course, but the components that you need to create that high performing classroom. Now, we know that instructor presence is a big deal in the high performance classroom. We can build learning experiences to really leverage instructor presence and help the instructor create that presence so the classroom becomes high performing. So first, let's start off by defining what a high performance classroom is. And there's four basic components to a high performance classroom. And the first one is outcomes. Outcomes within a high performance classroom are generally higher than a normal classroom. A sense of inclusion, a felt sense of inclusion from the students is a part of that high performing classroom. And remember, that's a part of psychological safety. We'll get into that on a different part of what we're going to chat through. And then there is a feeling of excitement. So students actually feel excited when they come to class, or when they come to the classroom. They don't have that sense of boredom. And this has all been statistically proven that these are the things that make up a high performing classroom. And the fourth, so last but not least, as they say, is we build learning that lasts. So in other words, if you're in a Psych 101 class and you're going to Psych 105, you're going to carry what you learned in 101 to 105 so you can use your previous knowledge in unique and creative ways to solve complex issues. So that's how we want to kind of look at creating our high performance classroom, whether it's online, in person, no matter where it is. You know me, I prefer online, but hey, not everybody does. So let's talk about right now cognitive load. Did you know that cognitive load is made up of three components? You have intrinsic cognitive load, extraneous cognitive load, and germane cognitive load. And those three make up the total amount of cognitive load that an individual experiences as they are learning a particular topic. Now, as an instructional designer, I am certain that we all constantly think about the extraneous cognitive load, because that's that stuff that we have a lot of control over, like how we create the classroom, the structure that we give the classroom, how we move from simple to complex, or whatever process that we use, make things not confusing in how we lay them out in the classroom. That is a huge piece of that extraneous cognitive load, making sure that things aren't in there just to be in there, like odd graphics that don't really match the content that's happening, or just I've actually seen people put cat videos in the background of stuff. So just getting rid of the extraneous stuff that doesn't need to be there. That is the extraneous cognitive load. I think that we all have a good handle on that, and we know what should and should not be in there. And we create that strong structure to help lower the cognitive load. There's also intrinsic cognitive load, which intrinsic is inherent to the topic. So the amount of cognition or cognitive load that's required to learn a topic. So an advanced math topic such as trigonometry or calculus is much more difficult to learn than a simple arithmetic problem. So the trigonometry inherently takes more cognitive load. It requires us to engage deeper and learn that. The topic is simply harder, so it requires more cognitive load. And there's things that we can do with that as well. And then there is germane cognitive load. This is cognitive load. This is considered the beneficial cognitive load because it helps us with learning and developing a deeper understanding of the content. And germane cognitive load, it really is the effort that's required to process And then once we process, we need to make sense of it. And then once we make sense of it, well, as we're making sense of it, really storing it in the long-term memory so we can recall it and use it in unique and creative ways to solve complex issues. So that's why the germane cognitive load is considered beneficial, because it helps us walk through that process of greater learning and deeper understanding of that content. So the germane cognitive load, it requires us to, it's the energy that is required to process the content, make sense of that content, and then store it in that long-term memory for easy access. And one way to do this is to set up the structure. And when I say structure, the learning structure, so not necessarily how you organize your classroom, but in a way it is how you organize the classroom as well. We want to set these students up for success. And the way I always teach students to study is PAPR, P-A-P-R. Don't have an E in there, but P-A-P-R. And the first stage is prepare. And in that preparation stage is where we really want to start connecting with that cognitive load, and specifically that germane cognitive load. And how do we begin with that connection to the germane cognitive load? Well, it's learning is not a simple topic, because learning is an activity. So it's always difficult, because we have to put our cognitive load into it. We have to put our energy into it. But there are simple ways to go about it. Doesn't mean that the process is simple, but there's ways that we can make the process simple and actually germane to the classroom that we create. And one way to do that is to add in, prior to learning content, a point where the student has to predict. And when they predict, they want to predict what they're going to learn. So they have the content of what it might be, a title, whatever it is of the content, maybe a description of a video that's going to happen, and then have them predict what they're going to learn. And when they're doing that, they're starting to create curiosity. And Sarah Kavanaugh loves to call learning or emotion the spark of learning. And curiosity is an emotion. Curiosity creates that spark of learning. So emotion creates spark of learning by Sarah Kavanaugh. Use curiosity. And the way we do that is in that initial phase before they've even learned about the content piece. We create curiosity by asking them to predict. And then the second way to do it, so predict what they're going to learn, how they're going to learn it, and then start asking them to predict how it's going to connect to their previous knowledge. Because now we're making connections with the networks they already have in their mind. When we create those connections to previously created networks, the learning tends to stick easier. It moves from the working memory into the long-term memory more easily, because it has a place to go. We're already starting to connect it. And the secret is they don't have to be right. They just have to be curious. And the curiosity is what opens us up to that learning process. Prediction helps us to crack ourselves open and really help that learning to stick, because we want that content to stick so we can then recall it quicker. And then one other piece of the structure. So we have prediction within the preparation, or within the prepare phase. So remember PAPR, P-A-P-R. In the prepare phase, we're going to have them predict, and then we're going to have them acquire the knowledge. How are they going to acquire the knowledge? Use active learning. So we want to create learner-centered courses where they use actual active learning. We don't want them just to read a paper, because just the act of reading, not helpful. It gives us a baseline of content, but if we go back and reread it, that's not even studying. So we don't want them to do that. We want to do active learning strategies. And the active learning strategies are going to be part 2 of this, where we dive into multiple ways where we can create our own micro learning, do different create different ways for students to be able to encode and really learn simply from the way we structure our course. There's many ways to create the opportunity for prediction. Let's start with online, because that's my favorite. One way that I have had a lot of luck with are through simple quizzes. Now, it's not a typical quiz that you see. Make sure it has graphics, possibly video. Ask those prediction type questions. And they can be anything. So I created a psych safety course. I had specific questions about each stage of psychological safety before they were going to learn that content. They would click on it, and then right, wrong, or indifferent, whatever answer they selected, they got a video of either me or one that I made from the system with just words coming up that explained that topic. So it opened them up to curiosity. They answered the question. They didn't know what the content was yet. So it was just kind of a guess, but it's an educated guess because they have a set of experience behind them already. So we want to capitalize on that. So that's how I started cracking it open and getting them used to adding new things to their network. And then they made the selection, made the choice, and they saw a video of myself giving the correct answer and kind of explaining really shortly why. So everything was less than 30 seconds. So they began predicting and started opening up those networks so the learning would stick. And it took them probably 5 minutes. So it's not like we're adding a ton of extra work to the student for this. So that's, from my perspective, adding that prediction piece is a huge part of a learner-centered classroom. And quite often, we simply don't do it. We dive right into the content. I've taken 4 professional development courses, and we just dove right into content. They basically told me what the objectives were. So it was very, the canned courses that professional development makes sometimes. Here's the objectives. This is what we're going to do. Go. And then we get into the content. The content was very well done, but they didn't set me up for success with that prediction piece.